Hey again, everybody. It's Josh with Tag and Tackle.
And me again, Spencer with Fintuition Guide Services.
We're talking steelhead and trout today in our Getting Into Fall Fishing in the Northwest series. Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Where do you want to start? So trout is going to be a species where a lot of people, it's very accessible to get started trout fishing.
Yeah.
Steelhead, there's a little bit more there, right? Fish 1,000 casts, 10,000, whatever it is. A little bit more involved with that, maybe not. Where do you want to start?
I mean, if we want to start with trout, we totally can. Definitely, it's a pretty easy fish to start targeting, like you said.
Let's do it.
When you're a beginner, they're abundant.
Okay.
They're in almost every river system. They're stocked in lakes and ponds.
Okay.
They'll take artificial lures like rooster tails. They'll take trout magnets. They'll take power bait setups. I mean, if you're getting into fishing, I think trout are super easy to fish for.
Okay.
Generally.
Okay. All right. So I'll talk a little bit about lakes. Let's keep it real simple.
Yeah.
I think since we have you here, a lot of this series in the fall fishing in the Northwest, if you're hitting all these different species, we'll spend the bulk of the time on some rivers and how to fish rivers.
Most people do, yeah.
Yeah. For those that are getting out on the lake, I think we'll just cut right to the chase. I love to throw a egg-shaped sliding sinker on my main line, put a barrel swivel there so that sinker can't go past that, put 20, 24 inches of line past that with a hook. If you're fishing around weeds, that leader should be as long as the weeds, because at the end of this, we're going to put some power bait dough. We're going to ball it up, stick it on that hook. They make some special treble hooks with a screw type wire on there that's supposed to hold that ball. I don't really mess with that. I tend to throw it right on an octopus hook or just something simple.
Yep.
Size 4 or 6, somewhere around there. Yep. You have to play with the dough size to make sure that hook floats. Obviously, that's a piece of metal. The power bait does float, but you got to have enough to get that and your line up, especially if you're using something like fluorocarbon, which is going to sink. So you have to play with that size. Test it in front of you in the water and something shallow you can see. Make sure that power bait's coming up. Toss it out there. Let that sink to the bottom. Your power bait's going to be floating above it. And when you start feeling little ticks and nibbles on that thing, start reeling it in.
Oh, yeah.
Catch a trout. That would be bank fishing on the lake at the highest level of tip that I could throw out there as far as bait fishing. Other than that, throw spinners, just like we've been talking about. Just chuck them out there, do a little fan casting.
Castmasters are super effective.
Love that. Some those are basically spoons, is that correct?
It's a spoon, little flutter presentation.
Is that, awesome. I mean, I know we're blowing through the lake stuff, but that's because I want to spend some time on the rivers.
Well, and honestly, lakes in fall aren't the greatest, I'm going to be honest with you. You got that turnover effect from the water cooling hotter. The fish aren't really on the bite. You got this little window of the bugs aren't active, so the fish aren't eating as much. They're really deep sometimes. It's just, fall lake fishing is very difficult unless you've got it dialed.
Yeah. Okay.
I honestly think rivers are easier this time of year.
To that point, and then we're going to talk about rivers. The one thing I'll throw out there, worms. I don't think anything beats, you can catch any of the fish we're talking about with an earthworm. Truly, you can put a split shot, 12, 14 inches above a hook, throw a worm on there, just let that sucker, just drown that worm.
Yep.
Fish, easy, simple.
Yep. I actually have come to become a firm believer, and one of my friends turned me onto this, but store-bought shrimp prawn.
Yeah, yeah.
You just cut that up. A little chunk of prawn on a hook, dude.
Yep.
Pretty impressive how good that works.
It is. And I suppose the last thing that also comes to mind for tough lake trout fishing, now that you've reminded me about this time of the season, potskis. Sometimes if you get a real small mosquito hook,
it's like 1 or 2 little potski eggs on it.
Put a little red potski eggs on that, and then again just chuck it out there. No weight even. Yeah. Just let the hook and those eggs just kind of sink. We're talking really, really small, subtle presentations when these fish are just totally turned off. Mm-hmm. You can still catch them. It's a little tougher on the bank, but certainly if you're on a boat, that's a great time to fire up the hot cocoa, have a coffee. Hopefully you're hanging out with a buddy, sit on the boat, and hopefully it's not pouring rain if it's a decent late fall, winter day.
Yeah.
I mean, at least you're out fishing, right? I mean,
Yes,
we'll
it can be
do
fun.
that. So,
It can be fun.
all right, there's some trout tips for the lakes.
Yeah.
Okay, we didn't want to leave the lake folks out, but let's talk rivers a little bit.
Let's do it.
So we've gone through, we had an introductory video, we talked coho in the last video. Is there anything different about the trout? Like when you're showing up to the river that kind of like, hey, I know there are trout here. We've done our research. We know there are trout just about everywhere. This one's a little bit simpler. What are you looking for in a river when you're targeting trout?
So there's a couple things I always tell my guys in the boat. Foam is home. Doesn't matter what presentation you got.
I love all these terms, phrases.
The foam is home. Wood is good. Made in the shade. Those are kind of my three, right? So if you see wood, cast to it. If you see foam lines, get something on that foam line or swinging through the foam line. If you see shade, cast to the shade. Those are the three most popular spots you'll find fish. Structure, food being brought to them, and security. So those are my kind of go-tos.
Awesome. All right.
To keep it short and sweet.
I love that. So the trout, other than there's ones coming from the sea, but they're there year round?
Yeah. Resident fish.
Okay.
Yep, they live in the river.
So those where you're finding fish, that generally is going to stay consistent throughout the year. Any seasonal changes that might change that up?
That's definitely a misconception with people, right? When they think the fish lives in the river, they think I caught him here today, he's going to be here for the rest of the year. That's wrong. The river is their home, so if it raises or lowers, where they're living is going to change, right?
Got it.
They got to find that place that they like to live in.
Okay.
And based off flow or clarity, those fish are going to move and find new lies, is what we're going to call them.
Love it.
So definitely need to change up what you're doing. So let's say really low clear water right now, summer, river's hot. Those fish are going to actually be in really, really shallow water, but fast moving riffles. Like right at the head, right where the most oxygenated water is. It's getting broken up from the rocks. It's creating more oxygen that way. It's bringing the food right to them. That's the best place for them to be. And believe it or not, they're dumb enough to think that the riffles over their head creates protection. So there they are.
Take advantage of those stupid little things.
Exactly. Get them all.
They're not as dumb as they'd like us to think.
And that doesn't mean all of them are going to be there. You'll still find the one in the occasional typical trout fly, right? They'll be there, but the majority of fish are going to move up and down. Now, they're not going to move like miles.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
They might move a quarter mile or so. They might move from one run to the next run. They're not going to go crazy far once they're in the system and living there, but they're going to move around.
So you're still looking for the same kind of things. The wood is good and all of the foam.
You always start with those.
And you might just have to look around the river given where the river levels are and the conditions, but you're still looking for the same types of
Those are
traits of the river.
Yeah, those are my key components.
Okay.
100%.
Got it. Awesome. Well, why don't we just dive right into the good stuff? We've covered a lot of basic fishing things the last couple of videos that apply to all these species. Let's talk flies.
All right, yeah. So trout flies are really cool in my opinion. They're usually really small. You know, there's something called a nymph, which is the aquatic bug that they're eating on the very bottom of the river. It's a very popular way to fish for them. They're usually really small, but I brought today one of my favorite nymphs, which is called a stonefly nymph. And the reason why I fish this almost year-round in any body of water that trout live in is because a stonefly nymph is a very big food source.
Okay.
It lives in the river for 2 years before hatching as an adult, meaning it doesn't come up to the top until it's 2 years of life in the river. So those fish see that bug a lot.
Okay.
Even if they're not around and hatching, the fish know that profile and they will eat that bug. Okay. So nymphing, always the most productive. If you're going to choose one type of form of fly fishing, nymphing is the best for trout. My favorite way to do it is with streamers, which are like these big, flashy, bushy patterns here. They're emulating basically like a bait fish or some type of attractor pattern. It's kind of like your spinner. So you throw it out there, you strip it back, you make some movement, the current will make it move, and those fish get triggered by that. It's more of just like looking for a big fish, not all the fish. And then there's, of course, your always popular dry fly fishing. thanks to a river runs through it. We have everybody thinking that's what you do for fly fishing, and it's the least productive way to catch a fish, but it's the most fun way because you see them eat off the top.
Yeah.
But again, that's like a whole thing of its own. I'm not even going to bother getting into it, but if you want to dry fly fish, it's very, very small windows to do it.
Okay.
So you're not going to catch a lot. Nymphing and streamers are hands down the most effective way to fish for
Future
trout.
videos.
Yeah.
Okay. What about color when it comes to these things?
You know, the nymphs, they're just kind of a natural tone all the time unless you put a bunch of flash in. And I'd say the most color doesn't really matter with trout. It's more presentation in the sense of how fast they're drifting to the fish or how low in the water column you're presenting them, because they're going to be chasing those aquatic bugs that are hatching. So they might be on the bottom, they might be in the middle. It all depends on where you're fishing your fly, you know?
Okay.
I don't think color matters as much as where in the water and how fast you're fishing it.
Okay. Awesome. What are some of your favorite gear lures, I suppose?
Rooster tails, cast masters, little Cleos, the spoon type of presentations, small blue foxes, you know, like size 2, size 1s.
Okay.
Those guys are awesome. But honestly, if you gave me that bumblebee pattern rooster tail, or like Panther Martin,
the Panther Martin,
or you gave me yellow with like black dots on it, like a bumblebee pattern of either of those two, dude, I'd feel pretty good going anywhere with those.
Fair enough. Yeah, we'll throw one of those up there with those Panther Martins that are kind of black with some yellow dots
I would
on them.
feel real good about either of those two.
Okay. I mean, when you get to the river, are we kind of breaking the river down similarly to like we discussed in the Coho video, where you're subdividing the river into sections and casting into them kind of deliberately and making sure you're covering water?
Yeah, I would say we're definitely doing the same thing. The only difference here is like once that river gets past like 6-7 feet, I honestly don't bother with it. I'm not saying there's not a fish in there, but most of the best trout are in that 3 to 4 feet, 6 feet max. Like, they're not going to really be in deep water.
Okay.
I've come to find them mostly in that like 2 to 4 feet is like a sweet spot for a nice trout. There's a really popular technique out there, bobber fishing. You know, you just grab a little slip float or some type of fixed float. Those are always really effective for trout because, as mentioned, the water's usually not deep. So, you know, you can set the float and still be able to reel the fish in and not have the bobber hit the top of the guides. But little jigs, trout magnets are really cool. A little rubber, like maggot looking thing that people fish on jig hooks under bobbers, and those are super effective if you don't want to do the spinner stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the line goes through that bobber. You have a bobber stop of some kind on the line. That's how you kind of adjust the depth, right? And then you just go right to the jig or any of those other things you just mentioned.
Yep.
And just cast that upriver.
Yep.
Let it just come down.
Yep.
All right. Talk about when a fish takes out. What are you looking for? Because bobber fishing is very interesting. We haven't gone into too much detail on either. The same technique with the coho and the other salmon stuff too.
Yeah.
Different baits, different sizes, all of that, of course. You're kind of stepping it up. But what are you looking for when you've got that bobber up there? You've got something drifting underneath.
Yeah. So there's a really cheesy saying that people say, like,
Another one?
This guy's name is Bob. Yeah, I got plenty. When Bob goes down, save Bob from drowning, pull him out of the water. Okay.
I like that.
So that's the most simple way to bobber fish, but I disagree 100%. Like that,
I like it.
that will happen, but I like in the fly world we call bobbers indicators, because I'm actually looking at this to tell me what the speed of my bait is in the water. It's telling me if I'm on bottom or not by the angle of the bobber, if I'm too low or if I'm too high.
Okay.
It also, not only will it drain when a fish eats it, but I've literally seen the bobber just kind of like fiddle.
When a fish is taking it?
Yeah. Okay. I've seen it just pause. I've seen it move upriver. I've seen really weird indications of non-natural drifts. Okay. Which usually means I'm either on a rock or a fish has it, right? Okay. So don't always rely on the bobber going down.
Got it.
Anything weird. Okay. In my mind, if the bobber does anything weird, that it's not just going like this downriver, do something.
Okay. You got to watch the bobber.
Watch the bobber.
So when you're bobber fishing, you got to keep an eye on that thing. And you can see all the, once you grab any of those.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see on the top, very bright colors. And that is so that you can see that thing in the water. Another trick that I've learned is if you take one of those corkies, here's an example. This is a small one. Let's see here. Boop, boop. Little corky like that. And stick that on your line above the bobber, so it's sitting up top. That's a great way to make sure your gear, your, I don't want to call it presentation, your setup is all working properly, because that corky will sit on top of that bobber. If it's off to the side or something looks wrong, it won't be sitting up there nice and snug. And so that's another way to just kind of see from the shoreline, like, oh, hey, something's not right there, reel it in. Make sure everything looks good. A lot of times you'll get your line twisted on itself or something like that around a weight. Straighten it all out, toss it out there. When it's working, that little cork will go boop, right on top of that bobber, and it'll look good.
It's like a mini indicator for your big indicator.
We're talking trout that it should work just fine for that too. Just smaller presentation.
Bobbers are bobbers. It's just what goes underneath them is what's going to change for the species you're fishing for.
Love it. Yeah. Okay. Do you drift? Okay. We've talked a little bit about trout. Again, great entry species. We're covering it kind of a high level, but some good nuggets in there. How much of this bobber stuff translates over to steelhead? Do you bobber fish for steelhead, or do you go totally different approaches?
I do all of it for steelhead.
Okay.
I will fish for those fish to the day I die, and I'll do anything for them because I like to catch them. But bobber fishing is hands down the more popular way to do it.
Okay.
It seems to be the more effective way, specifically for the winter steelhead. Being a more lethargic, bottom-lying fish, it's better to get your bait down to them. Slow drifts, long drifts, keeping it in the zone for as long as possible is the most effective way to get them. They're not going to move very far like a summer steelhead would. So the bobber fishing is definitely more relevant to the winter steelhead. But summer steelhead, you can bobber fish for them. It still works, but there's no reason to not throw spinners or spoons and feel that incredibly aggressive take, because the summer steelhead are the ones that are easier to catch and they're more active, so they're going to move to the presentation more than you have to hit them right in front of the face to get them to bite.
Okay. So this is interesting because we were talking about getting into fall fishing, and the steelhead are interesting because while there used to be a fall run, is that correct?
Yeah, fall and spring runs used to be pretty prominent.
Okay, so there's kind of like some leftovers from that, to my understanding. According to our first video, I don't know if that made the cut or not, but there's also summer and winter, right? That's really the primary runs.
Those are the dominant runs.
So you have this interesting thing where you can have early winters and you can have late summers, and so there are steelhead in the system, and they're kind of, they could be one or the other. So they're there. We're talking about summer. We're talking about winter. But they are all there. They're there throughout the fall season.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Perfect. What are you floating under a bobber if you were to bobber fish in the fall?
Yeah. So the most popular these days, it's a bead, right? A soft bead or a hard bead. It looks very similar to like the corky in size. They come in different colors. The difference between the corky and the bead is the beads are not buoyant, so they stay down better. So. I see. That's the big one that you're going to hear a lot. I'm a huge fan of jigs, like marabou tied jigs. I tie all these up, and pink worms are a very popular one that guys like. The pink worm, very similar to the bass world. You can cut the worm and size it down based on your presentation or what you think the fish might like. So that's a pretty versatile bait.
Okay.
If you want to add scent to these, water soluble is the best way to go.
Okay.
But you can add scent to either one of these presentations.
Awesome.
Beads too, making them incredibly effective for any angler.
What's a scent recommendation?
Don't laugh at me. I don't know how to pronounce it the correct way.
Anise.
What is it?
It's anise.
That one. Yeah. Or krill.
Okay. Got it. Love it. I knew you were going with that one. But we could just say anus and have fun with it.
There you go.
Right.
That's where I was going.
All right. Awesome. Okay. What techniques do you love other than the bobber stuff? So great transition into steelhead. Let's talk steelhead. This is your bread and butter, your baby here.
Favorite presentation, swinging flies, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
No. Really, what's your favorite fly for steelhead?
All right, yeah, let's do it. Black and blue marabou flies, okay? A little bit of flash in there, but essentially it's just a big, like 2-inch, 3-inch pattern of black and blue marabou. That is my year-round summer or a winter steelhead. Swinging a fly, that's gonna get the job done.
Okay, I love it.
It works. Besides fly fishing, real quick, you can indicator or bobber fish with fly rods. You can use beads, you can nymph for steelhead. The only reason I bring this up is because in our world, the fly industry, it's very controversial topic. Some people think it's a cheating way to catch steelhead because the numbers are so low. You want to give a fish a chance. I'm not here to get political. Go catch them. If you've never caught a steelhead on a fly rod, do it any way you want because it is the coolest experience ever. So just go fishing, guys. All I ask is respect the steelhead, right? They're a low number fish, unlike salmon. So if you're gonna fish for them, just respect them. But besides fly fishing, spinners, they'll have their game. Surprise, surprise, just like a coho. Blue body, silver blade. And my absolute favorite is always gonna be a spoon. Gold spoons are my favorite. Two tones work really good, like a half silver, half gold. But definitely spoons are the way to go just because it's closest to swinging a fly and it elicits that incredible aggressive grab.
Okay. And I noticed those are two of the same lures that you're throwing for coho.
Surprise, surprise.
And those will work for Chinook?
They will.
And will they work for chum?
Absolutely.
Could even a good sized trout go after one of those?
I literally had a sea run cutthroat chase this one today, which is why I put on a fly to catch it because it wanted that. So, yeah.
Awesome. What else do you want to share about steelhead? Anything that jumps out about that fish that you feel like folks should know that sets them apart?
Yeah, so besides respecting them, I'm just saying it one more time because it's a really important thing to me. These fish, we want them to come back. We were known for having them. We don't have a lot anymore, so it'd be cool to see them back in the Pacific Northwest in strong numbers. But summers are different than winters. So a summer steelhead is usually going to be a skinnier, hotter fish, meaning it's a way more aggressive fish. They're going to move through the water. They're coming in ready to do their thing. They're ready to just crush anything in front of them. So they're easier to catch. Spinners definitely work the best, and I think it's a fun fish to chase. The Deschutes has a great run, so if you're looking to catch a fish, go fish the Deschutes. It's a pretty cool place for them. The winter fish being more cold water based, being more lethargic. They come into the river sexually mature to spawn, so you really want to get that bait down low. They're not really aggressive as far as like feeding, so you want to get low and slow. You want to get in front of their face. You're really just trying to piss them off, and you got to do it. You got to know where they're at. Like you got to be on that fish, whether it's a spinner, spoon, fly. You got to be
on it. You mean you need your bait presented right at that fish.
If you can't tackle the fish, I'm kidding. Don't tackle the fish. Literally get in their zone. They have a small bite window for sure. In my opinion, I think like a 1.5 feet.
Okay.
If you're in front of that fish's face with at least 1.5 feet, you're probably going to get bit. Anything.
So this goes to show you the importance of being able to read a river and knowing where the steelhead are likely to be staging or whatever, wherever they're going to be for any given reason. So this is where you kind of got to learn the behavior of the species, and then maybe be accurate casting enough to get it where it needs to be.
Yeah,
there is that. So if you need to practice your casting, go find a nice field, get out there and do some practice casting your perfecting your cast. Sorry.
I think accuracy does matter, but real quick to just kind of briefly cover the main differences in my opinion, the importance is summer steelhead being more aggressive, flashier, more water covering presentations like spinners and spoon. That's going to be your best bet. Steelheading is not just about accuracy, it's more so depth. Winter steelheading, pardon me. It's more so depth. So yes, it's good to get it where you think they are, but you need to know how fast you're getting down. And that I think is where more people catch winter steelhead versus go fishing for winter steelhead.
I like that. Okay. How do you find the depth? How do you dial in your depth? Walk us through that process.
For sure. So, in the fly world, we fish a lot of sink tips, and sink tips sink at a certain rate. So you can buy a tip that will sink at X amount of inches per second.
Okay.
It's pretty easy to do some math. If you just...
Not for me.
Yeah, true, I guess.
Throw a calculator in a tackle bag.
Yeah, right. And so you put slack into the line, and that by using like a mend or something like that, right? So that'll induce some slack. That allows the sink tip to pull everything down at that sink rate.
Okay.
So you can just add, right? So if it's a 6 inch per second, and you're counting that baby down, 6, 12,
okay.
Boom, boom. You're weighting down 4 seconds. You're 2 feet down.
Okay.
Cool. Same thing kind of with spinners and spoons. They have a weight to them. Mm-hmm. So you drop that in the river right in front of you.
Okay.
In the current, right? Kind of watch it flutter. Count it out.
Okay.
It gives you an idea of where you're at in the middle of the river. It might not be precise, but it's way better than just chucking something out there and starting your retrieve right away, or aimlessly waiting for it to get down on a rock, and then by the time you start your retrieve, you're already on the bottom.
Yeah. Okay.
You're going to lose gear. That's the thing that you're going to hear, right? If you're not losing gear, you're not fishing. It's kind of true. But once you find what you need to do to start fishing effectively, you shouldn't be losing as much gear anymore. You got to find the bottom. You got to find structure somehow. So you're probably going to sacrifice a spoon or a spinner at one point.
Okay.
But once you touch bottom, be conscious of what happened, right? How long did it take to get there?
So some of this is feel, some of this is experience. Like, there's no real way to figure out how deep a hole is in a river. You're not out there with a fish finder.
Not unless you're floating it or something, or scuba diving.
Okay, until you feel the bottom.
Yep.
You could get snagged at that moment. You might not. So that's kind of like getting the experience in the field, just being out there to see how fast whatever bait you have, whatever lure you're using, sinks in current to get to the bottom. And so you kind of have to figure out the depth by just the feel and paying attention.
Yeah.
Is there a better way to do it?
Not really in my opinion. I don't think so. You just got to keep fishing, right? Because every river's different and every spot on a river is different. And so that's kind of where I think like it's nice to know these tips and tricks that we're giving you guys, but at the same time, like the river I fish and guide on isn't going to be what you guys probably fish and work on if you do guide. So it's a matter of getting out there, going fishing, and trying these things that we're teaching you about. Like, we're here to help you be more effective and more productive on your rivers using these techniques. That doesn't mean everything I do on the Clackamas is exactly what you're going to go do on like the Cowlitz up in Washington, right? So, and even then, like the river today might fish different in 3 months, so I might wait a little longer to get deeper when the river comes up.
Yep,
right?
It all changes. I suppose one technique, if there's one to stand out, tell me what you think about this, is the bobber jig or something like that. We have a weight on the bottom, because generally speaking, that thing should be hopefully heavy enough where it's kind of directly
vertical
down. And when you throw that out there, you'll know by, like you said earlier, if that bobber's kind of tilting downstream, you're dragging along the bottom, or it might get hung up, or you might just feel it. So you can see how much line do I have past my bobber and bobber stop to where I'm starting to hit the bottom. And if it's, let's say you got 8 feet out, well, you're fishing an 8 foot depth.
Yeah.
So that is, I suppose, one way that comes to mind, that you still have to fish it and you still trial and error. Unless you know the spot.
Correct. Yeah.
It's still that, but it is an easy way to go. That's about 8 feet, as opposed to trying to calculate. I think the spinner's probably dropping it 6 inches.
So
that can get challenging.
I totally see what you're asking.
Yeah,
I get it. So that's definitely the best way to find how deep of a hole you're fishing. But you still need to understand, you guys, you're going to lose gear that way too. It doesn't mean you're losing less gear finding bottom, but it is definitely a more accurate way to gauge the depth of the hole.
And I think as you get experience, you will be able to do that with your lures and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
You start to see it. You'll fish it in clear water days and be like, I can see how fast it's sinking now, and you're going to put that together. But if you don't have that experience and that feel yet, that's maybe a cheat code.
True.
Where are the steelhead in that depth? Once you know how deep it is, are they at the bottom?
So check this out. Remember when we talked about how a trout and a rainbow or a steelhead are kind of the same thing? One's just an ocean-bound trout. Well, they like the same kind of water as a trout, you guys. So foam is home. Wood is good. Made in the shade. That all applies. They like 3 to 6 feet depth water. They don't like super deep pools. They do not like incredibly shallow riffles unless the water is incredibly hot. But what you might want to pay attention to, and this really will benefit a lot of you anglers to catch more of these fish, is they do have a very repetitive staging area. Every run will have a very flat section of the run where literally it levels out. You can see the current just come completely uniform from the left bank to the right bank or whatever side you're on. Everything becomes one, it seems like. That's where most of the steelhead are going to be. They're incredibly lazy. They don't like hydraulics. They're going to be on the flattest portion of a river.
Interesting.
And the longer that flat is, the better a chance you're going to find a fish in there.
I'll be danged. I didn't know that.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't know a lot of this stuff. That's why you're here.
If you ever come out with me next time, pay attention to where I park the boat. Everything, comes from a hill to a flat.
Who gets a guide to take them out and pays attention?
That's a good point.
I thought you're supposed to just make it happen.
There's a reason I repeat myself all damn day out there.
What else do you want to share about steelhead, or if anything? Have we kind of covered it all?
You know, I feel like we kind of covered it all. They're not a really...
Not all, but all we're going to cover today.
Yeah. They're not a very technical fish, honestly.
Okay.
I don't think they're a very technical fish. You hear they're super hard to catch. They're the fish of 1,000 casts.
Yeah.
Sure. It's timing, you guys. All these fish that we just talked about, besides the trout, they're not resident species. They're anadromous fish. They're coming from the ocean. They're moving into their spawning grounds and tributaries to make babies and die. So... really, it's not a technical thing. It's being there when they're there. And also knowing, based on what the water is doing, where those fish are going to go and why they're going there. If you can put all those key variables together, your chances of a 50% day are going to go to 75%. Nothing's ever 100%, right? But we can definitely increase our odds of running into one of these creatures.
I love it.
It's pretty cool once you put all the pieces together and crack the code, so to speak. You definitely have a better day. But it's not as hard as people make it out to be. Just go, be observant, really be observant. If you're not paying attention to what didn't work and what worked, you're never going to get better. Okay. And honestly, the days that you don't catch, you should be analyzing more than the days you caught, because you can learn from a bad day. Bad days are not always just bad days. They can be educational. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So once again, get out there and give it a shot. I think a lot of what you just discussed is improved heavily if you do your research. You kind of keep an eye on the water temperature. We share some tools, the USGS site out there, fish counts, weather reports, all that stuff. Do a little bit of investigation up front,
yeah.
And it'll improve your odds massively and make sure you have a great time.
If you put your time in on the river and a little bit off the river, you're definitely going to be better, but you got to get on the river.
Awesome.
That's number one.
Okay. Get out there, catch fish, everybody.
That's what I'm going to do.
How do they get a hold of you, Spence?
FintuitionLLC.com is my website. You can also reach out to me on Instagram, fintuition_. That'll be where you can reach me.
Awesome. Tagintackle.com if y'all want some trout, bass stuff. We're always trying to grow, trying to get more of the salmon gear on there as well. If you guys want to hear future topics, have questions, comments, please throw them in the chat, or in the comment section.
We can be a chat.
We can chat. We'll chat next time. We'll do a live next time. No problem.
Why not?
Share this thing. Subscribe. All of that jazz. We really appreciate the support. We're going to keep doing this stuff. We're enjoying it, and we just want to help people get into the sport and have a great time and enjoy themselves. So,
yeah, man. There's a lot of water out here. There's a lot of fish out here, and you guys should enjoy it.
More to come soon. See you on the next one, y'all. Take care.